Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hailing from the Caribbean and the region, the international as well. We are here today to cover our webinar, or to kick off, I should say, our webinar Wednesday series, which is coming or emanating out of the Caribbean Strategy Summit for 2024. If you've been with us for a while, that means you would have attended our last 2 years. Our first team was on strategic planning. Last year was on strategic performance management. This year's theme is on strategy execution. I'm your host and the host of the Caribbean Strategy Summit. And today we're kicking off the Webinar Wednesday series, Breaking Barriers and Overcoming Obstacles in Strategy Execution. So leading up to the summit, which takes place in June on 27th and 28th, and we'll hear a little bit more about that at the end of our presentation today, we are going to be hosting this series of webinars to assist in sparking your enthusiasm for the upcoming summit and to provide an overview of each of the CSS 2024 symposium feature lectures, as well as current content on riveting strategy topics. So it's just a preview of the summit events, offering just a hint of the strategy execution gems that lie ahead. So feel free to sign up for the upcoming webinars as well. There are 2 more. Hopefully we can see you guys there. So webinar 1, titled Digital Transformation and its Impact on Strategy Execution. So disruption from technologies, as you know, such as AI, often creates anxiety and uncertainty for strategy professionals and organizational leaders. So this webinar today is going to examine the challenges and the opportunities presented by rapid technological advancements, but how sound strategy execution practices related to both leadership, alignment, as well as culture can help you and your organizations adapt quickly to these disruptive transformation challenges, and so that you are able to successfully execute strategy. Today, our presenter is no other than David Wilesy, and he is the CEO of the Balanced Scorecard Institute, a slew of experience in his background as a consultant and trainer with the Balanced Scorecard Institute. And so I hand you over to David at this time. David?
Thank you, Nichelle, and welcome everybody. I'm happy to be here. Today we're going to talk about digital transformation and its impact on strategy execution. This is one of those things that I think all of us face as strategy professionals and as leaders of our organizations. We are constantly having to address new disruptions, whether they're technology related or otherwise. But today we'll focus specifically on some of those challenges we see, like AI and some of the other things that are on the horizon as a threat to our strategy, and make sure that we're approaching them with the same discipline and the same careful consideration that we do any other kinds of strategy issue that we have to face. As Nichelle said, I'm David Wilsey. I'm the CEO for Balanced Scorecard Institute. As you probably all know, we help organizations with strategy, with strategic planning, balanced scorecard, KPI or OKRs, anything related to strategy execution. We help people on a consulting basis and in terms of training and certification. I'm coming to you from my home, actually, in Cary, North Carolina. We are based in the U.S. here in North Carolina. All right, so like I said, if you're like me, you've been probably over the last few years, you get these emails from concerned employees or maybe leaders of the organization. That maybe they're forwarding you these news headlines that artificial intelligence is an unprecedented disruption that's about to change everything, right? Maybe it's virtual reality. Virtual reality is going to disrupt all of our businesses. Maybe it's digital currencies. We're all going to have to, stop using the money that we're using now and pay our bills with some other currency. And maybe it's somebody who's worried about losing their job. Back when it was just automation and factories, it didn't affect, you know, the other half of the economy. Now AI is going to cause all the rest of us to lose our jobs too, and so robots and AI are going to take over the world. Or maybe it's just that the remnants of the COVID change. Um, that, you know, we all work from home now, and technology is constantly changing it. And it's not just work from home. It's the way we travel. It's the way we order food. It's the way we watch TV. It's the way we, you know, order things off of Amazon or any other service. Our cars are different. Technology is constantly changing our world. And so as a strategy professional, our role is to make sure that we approach these changes in a disciplined manner, and with consideration for a disciplined process to make sure that we have the right context, we understand how this we can actually leverage this technology to implement our strategy more effectively. And we always approach strategy execution with these lenses. This is the strategy execution imperatives. You know, and when you're talking about a new technology, oftentimes you have to go all the way back to the planning elements, right back to the beginning. Is there something about our strategy that we need to do differently? We need to change based on this new disruption in the market. And then we like to bridge that planning document with a successful strategy execution by thinking through these various imperatives, the foundation being engaged leadership and governance, right? New technology is not something that is only handled by the IT department. This is something that the leadership team needs to think through and make sure that we understand the ramifications on our strategy. Then there are all the portfolio management prioritization elements that need to be thought through. Do we need to maybe stop some current initiatives and implement some new initiatives based on this new technology that is emerging? Do we want to, whatever strategy we do come up with, we want to know whether we are actually implementing it effectively or not. That usually means analyzing performance, visualizing it, understanding it, sharing our performance information. It means operationalizing that strategy. So it's not good enough to just identify the high level goals or the high level themes of our strategy. You have to also translate that into operational terms so that people actually know what to do differently day in and day out. And that finally brings me to the culture element. A lot of these technology elements actually have a performance culture ramification. We're changing the way we interact. You know, we're all working from home. We're all using Zoom. We're all using AI. Every single one of those changes, your team will want to think through what does that do to our culture, and what do we need to do differently. And if you can, in a disciplined manner, approach all of these imperatives well, if you do these effectively, it can lead to a successful strategy execution. And there are certain principles that we like to think about when we are addressing disruption, whether it's technology related or anything else. And I think that most of us have gotten much better at this since the COVID era. I think that, you know, in 2019, you would never have imagined some of the changes that have happened in the last 4 years. And so most of us are now very comfortable with the idea that even the most basic assumptions underlying our strategy have to be challenged periodically. You have to ask yourself, what happens if something changes? And you have to be, you know, so that we're all ready as strategy professionals, we're helping the organizations adapt. And you can't be a perfectionist. That's one of the ways that you become more agile, is that you know, we're going to come up with an 80% solution and be ready for the change, even if it's not entirely perfect. Because you know what, we might design our strategy around chat GPT 3.5, and then 6 months later the new version is out and it's completely different and we have to change again. That's the nature of adapting to technological change. We always approach everything from a disciplined process standpoint. We want to make sure that we articulate what we're trying to accomplish. We are translating that into goals and objectives you know, throughout the organization. We're measuring our progress. We're implementing an action plan. We're connecting dots. And if you don't trust that process, what happens is sometimes a leader will start to panic. They'll get one of those emails that I mentioned about a new technology, and they'll immediately start talking about how is that implementation of ChatGPT 3.5 going, and it's immediately down into the weeds, and they don't trust the fact that we will get there. You want to make sure that everything is in the context of the outcomes that you're aiming for. The other really important thing with technology is to do your research. There has been a flurry of artificial intelligence tools that have come out in the last year or two. And so you cannot read one of these headlines that are very alarming and panic. If you do the research, you figure out what the tools are, what they're designed for, how are they useful to you. You might learn that actually there's nothing to be afraid of. This is a tool that we will be able to use for this context and not use for other contexts. Maybe it's not such a threatening change as it appears when you read that news headline. And as our friend Dan Montgomery, he's one of the co-authors of our book, as he likes to talk about, is adopting a more agile mind frame. That means when we create a strategic plan, we don't try to predict a precise future. We don't assume that we know what the world is going to look like in 3 to 5 years. We want to embrace uncertainty. We're strategy professionals. We're supposed to be good at this. We see change and we adapt. We change the plan because we're good at articulating what we're trying to accomplish and organizing our thoughts around those outcomes. And if that means changing the tool on the fly, changing the details, that's okay. And then it's speeding up the action learning cadence. What that means is we have a regular review session. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's 3 times a year, something along those lines, where we review what we're trying to accomplish and we review the progress we're making. And if we need to change something, we can change those. And so if a COVID type change happens, we are ready to adapt on the fly. We don't have to wait for 3 or 4 years for that strategic planning lifetime to play out before we can make a change. So again, organizing our thoughts around outcomes. If my objective is to improve the customer experience and I'm using an AI tool to enable that improved experience, then the details of the tool don't dictate our success or failure. It's whether we're achieving the outcome that really matters. So I can implement tool A today and adapt the details later. Sometimes when we do a lot of work related to our process. Some people get very married to the result. Whatever it is we created, we create a poster, we've got objectives and measures and initiatives. And so because we invested so much time in a particular initiative, therefore we have to live with that result forever. That's not the right mentality. If you want to be able to adapt on the fly, you have to be able to live with the fact that sometimes we're going to implement an initiative and then determine that was the wrong initiative and we need to invest in something new and be okay with that change. The other thing that I like to caution people is that for most of my clients anyway, change is much more incremental than these alarming headlines imply. If I'm working with a utility and artificial intelligence comes out, yes, over the course of years, they will be implementing artificial intelligence solutions, but they don't need to do this in a matter of weeks. Their lives are not going to change that fast. So there's no reason to panic. Unless you work in a software company that is right on the cutting edge, most of us can make these changes over time. So the context, it does matter. So the context is created by doing an assessment. And this is just like any other strategic planning effort. You go back to the beginning and you ask yourself, what does this disruption mean relative to our high level strategy? Who are we what is our mission? What is our vision for the future? What do we value? And what is our strategy? So if I'm trying to assess a new artificial intelligence strategy or a strategy related to virtual currency or anything, I want to do that assessment within the context of our current strategy. So what is the context, internally and externally for deciding what we do with this? And there's all kinds of tools, as a strategy professional, you'll want to be familiar with these various tools to know which tools you want to use to help assess whether we need to implement this or not. And then realize that most of these conversations are just that. It's not about one strategy professional sitting in their office making these big decisions. It's really usually about a conversation. We want to facilitate a conversation and develop a consensus around what we should be doing with these new tools or not. And then you can also look at this as a risk analysis exercise. I mean, you don't have to have a risk management office in your organization in order to apply some of these principles. And that is to score the risk related to a particular technology. Is this the kind of technology that will shut us down? What is the worst case scenario? Is it going to shut us down, or is it something that we're going to wrestle with for the next year or two? Or is it, in reality, like I said, in some cases, this is not a technology that will actually affect us directly. So it might be something we'd end up talking about a lot, but in reality, it's not that big a deal. And so it's sometimes useful to actually score any risk, in terms of impact and probability. What are the odds that this is going to happen? And if it does happen, or if this technology does take over, how much of an impact will it have on us as an organization? And so if you, as a team, are putting these new threats up here in the red, obviously you're going to spend a lot more time implementing your strategy related to this than if you upon further consideration, maybe artificial intelligence isn't really probably going to affect us very much, and you put it down here. Okay, so and this is part of developing a strategy. So again, we use the same process to develop strategy. Whether it's our high level plan, or if you're thinking about a disruption related to technology. What are the various scenarios that we could think about? There are different possible futures depending on how these tools are adopted by our customers, by our various stakeholders. What do our customers actually need? Maybe what we have is perfectly okay. It's meets their needs okay. They don't need that perfect that new cutting edge solution yet. And so what is our value proposition, and how does this new technology fit within that context? We always come back to, what are we actually trying to achieve? What are the results that we're trying to achieve? What are our goals? And then once in a great while, it will rise to the level of, this is a new strategy for us. I'm going to even have a theme related to this strategy. And if so, what does success look like within that context? So then if it does, maybe it doesn't create a new one, but maybe it influences some of the other themes that we have. So, that just as strategy professionals, hopefully you're familiar with this terminology, that theme being your focus areas for the organization, the pillars of excellence. The key here is that we want to make sure we understand what the outcome is for each one of these strategies that we're implementing. Okay, and so like I said, some organizations will actually look at these and they'll say, artificial intelligence, I keep using that as an example, but any of these would work. Artificial intelligence is going to affect our growth strategy, our building the business strategy. And so we need to tweak that here or there. Some of them will actually come up with a brand new strategy like this. But, during COVID, you might have seen that organizations come up with a business continuity strategy, a whole theme around making sure that we have the technology infrastructure, the cross-training, cultural support in order to deliver new services from home. You might have online, a lot of organizations move their services online. Training, consulting clients engage our products and services through a diverse set of online offerings. So if that's your strategy, can we translate that into terms that can be, that make sense in an operational sense? Can we translate them into objectives? Which if you can create a picture like this is a visual picture of your strategy. I want to understand what the relationship is between our objectives rather than just write a long narrative like we have on the right side of the screen. So a tool like this helps you connect the dots between all the various elements in your strategy. I have my high level strategy up here at the top. I have objectives on the left. I have measures, targets telling me whether we're accomplishing anything, and then I have initiatives that reflect the actions that we're going to take. These are the projects we're going to implement to make things better. So if this is in a generic sense what we'd look like in a strategic plan, if I want to do this for one of these new strategies, I could take as an example online services and have my team say, what does that strategy look like? Well, we need the infrastructure. We need the right facilitation skills. If we can do that, it helps me improve online services. If I can do that and we have marketing, it helps us grow the customer base within that context. So I need the analysis skills, driving our marketing activities, driving online participation. Customers are happy with our services. All of that is driving revenue and so forth. So if I have a picture like this, it provides context for the rest of the organization to implement this, make it happen. Okay, so how do I know whether we're successful or not? I might have measures. Each of these measures are tied to this particular strategy. Maybe I've got actions that I'm taking around redesigning our services. I've got some marketing activities. A campaign I got to implement. We've got infrastructure problems we've got to overcome first, and so forth. And the point is, I am connecting dots. I want to be able to connect the dots from the high level all the way down to the work that people are actually doing, from mission and vision down to our broad plan, down to the operating goals. What are people actually doing on the ground? And then, in terms of our teams, and then individuals, what do they actually do? And so a framework like this and the strategy execution imperatives provide that context to help people connect these dots. Then I promised that I would come back to this. In order to maintain that sense of agility, the ability to change on the fly as technology changes, requires what we call a discipline review cycle. Okay, and so this is our MPRA is our improv performance measurement development model. And so rather than teach you the whole the step-by-step process of developing performance measures, what I want to focus on today is this part of the screen. So every quarter, you set targets, you implement initiatives, you start collecting performance data, you draw conclusions, and then you report and share. And if you do this on a regular basis with a certain amount of discipline, it means that on a regular basis, you will come back to this adaptation phase where you ask yourself, has anything changed? We're implementing a new AI strategy, and you know what? It turns out that Perplexity or maybe Copilot or Gemini, maybe one of these other tools is going to be the better fit for us, and we're going to have to change that. And so we, the details get changed. Maybe my strategy stays the same, but the details change. Maybe the strategy, we decide that this is really about the customer experience, and AI turned out not to be the right tool. Maybe there's something else that we want to do. And so I might even go all the way back to the high level strategic intent and redefine my objectives based on a different strategy. And the point is that if you have this discipline embedded in your organization, it will force you to consistently go back to that question as to how we should be adapting to whatever change is happening in the market. Okay. The other thing I want to do is make sure that I'm connecting dots throughout my organization. And you can do that on the performance side as well. I've got a strategy. This is about an operational excellence, but maybe this could be tied to any of your strategies where you have your new online services. You put your result here. The point is that you have outcomes related to customer satisfaction. You've got general concepts that we're aiming for, and we've got measures down here. I've got product delivery, which is prove, which is what's directly connected to our satisfied customers. I've got measures there. I've got customer interaction. How do we interact with our customers on the phone or in person? And are people satisfied with that? I've got production quality elements that I'm tracking, and I want to connect that to the happy customer. And then finally, maybe I go all the way back to my resourcing, and this has to do with money and resources and infrastructure and all of those foundational elements. Can I connect the dots throughout my organization so that I know that what we're doing here is ultimately driving a satisfied customer within this strategy? Another thing I want to do is, as I'm tracking performance, I want to be able to visualize the connection between the KPIs or the measures that I'm tracking here in blue and our initiatives. If I implement an initiative, is it making a difference or not? That's another visual that's really useful to see, so that I know I'm not just implementing the initiative just for the fun of it. I'm doing it to drive that KPI in a certain direction so that I'm achieving my objectives. Okay, so this is all about the principles of good visualization. Okay, do I understand what my audience wants to see in this visualization? Is it telling a story? Is it easy to interpret? Is it visually appealing? Is it intuitive? And so forth. And that builds on this visual as well. You also, if you're making changes to your strategy based on these new technological changes, you'll also want to change the visual that you're using to understand the timeline of implementation. Okay, so this one shows your measures up here. What are we trying to achieve, and where do we expect to be from a target standpoint? We're currently at 70% on livability. We want to be to 80% by the third quarter of 2022. We want to be to 85% by this date, and so forth. I've got per capita income we're also tracking. We have targets tied to that. And I'm implementing as a city, this is a city example, I'm implementing my initiatives. If one of my technology initiatives has to be removed and replaced with a new one, I'll want to adapt all of these visuals so that people can see where we stand in time relative to our goals. All right, one final thing before I turn things back over to Nichelle. We get a lot of questions about artificial intelligence and planning. What about the planning process? Can't we just open up ChatGPT and say, can you create an inspiring strategy and fully executable strategic plan for my organization? And won't it just spit out a plan, a strategic plan? Isn't that what ChatGPT is, or any of the rest of these tools I was listing? Isn't that what that's designed to do? Well, the answer is not really. Not really. We've experimented with it quite a bit with clients and internally, and we've learned quite a bit. There's a lot of useful elements here, but what we've noticed is that there is a wow factor. You ask a question, ChatGPT spits out an answer, and everybody says, "Wow, that's awesome." And then you read it and you realize that it's actually conventional thinking. It's all it does is go out into the internet and find all the data about your question, and it sort of crafts a sentence that's coherent. It's not customized, it's not nuanced, it really doesn't understand anything about your organization. It's just a mechanical exercise. I've also noticed that prompt writing is a problem. In other words, I can ask one question, and Nichelle will ask a similarly worded question to the tool, and we'll get completely different answers. And that is a curious experience when you're trying to design strategy. The other thing is it spits out facts that are not right. They're not correct. And so you have to think of it as a tool that's maybe useful for generating ideas, but realize you do have to do your research on everything that it tells you. It's tempting, though, because of the wow factor, to be seduced, as it says on the slide, by the polish of the output and say, "Wow, that's so good. Let's just keep that." But in actuality, the strategy is probably not the best thing for you to implement. When we've used this internally, the wow factor quickly translates into let's change it completely, and we've never ever keep what it spits out. We always end up rewriting it completely. It's useful information. It's sort of useful food for thought. It never matches the lexicon that you use exactly. That's another issue. But it is good for kickstarting the process. It's good for research, learning very quickly. I think of it as having an intern on staff, and you ask the intern to go do some work and bring it back to you. You would never just keep that. You always rework it yourself, but it is useful for wordsmithing, writing, outlining, doing some analysis, and so forth. So anyway, that we can talk about AI more, later if anybody has questions. But that's been our experience with that. So anyway, so if you want to learn any more about this, obviously we have our certification programs. You're more than welcome to come to our website, or we'd love to see you down in St. Lucia. The end of June, I'm going to turn things over. Well, actually, let's see if we have some questions, and then we'll turn things back over to Nichelle to talk about that event. So if on the Zoom menu, there's a Q&A box. If anybody has any questions, rather than use I have the chat open as well, but I'd rather you use the Q&A so that we can see it and answer them on the right menu.
And I think we had a pre-existing question as well. Yes, David?
That's right. Let's see what was
Not
that.
sure if you saw that one. While we wait on the others to put theirs in.
Yes, we had a question earlier about how technology adoption and techniques enhance tax collection and compliance. And I'm not a tax expert and I'm not a compliance expert. I'm a strategy expert. So the way I would address that is to say what we coach people to do is make sure that your strategy is clear. Here's what success looks like. Here is what our strategy is for creating that success. In other words, tax compliance is making sure that everybody does what they're supposed to do. They file their taxes on time and so forth. Our strategy for doing that is part of it is about education, and part of it is about enforcement. Maybe I'm just making this up. So I have a strategy related to those. I need certain capacities. I need the right people. I need the right tools. We need the right technology. Maybe we need to enable people to be more compliant. Maybe we need some AI driven tools for people to use online. So instead of using TurboTax or one of these online company tools, I think the U.S. government is doing this actually. They log into my tool, and so we as the tax collecting organization needs this new technology to enable taxpayers to use this technology, but it's still related to our fundamental strategy of improving enforcement, improving compliance. Those are the outcomes we're aiming for. And today we're talking about AI, and then tomorrow we're talking about something else. I hope that answers your question.
We have one more, and that's transforming culture is a pain in the neck. How then do we institutionalize a performance culture required to harness the disruptive technologies? And
Yes.
that's from Bert.
Yes, Bert. No doubt. It is a pain in the neck. You can think of it that way. You could also think of it as um, managing an organization is about managing people and making sure that you help people along. You have to, they see a lot of these changes as a threat. And so you have to work with them to help make sure they understand that these changes are not necessarily a threat. That's specifically talking about the technology. We have an entire module on culture and performance culture, and there are all kinds of elements related to managing the performance culture. So I appreciate the challenge of it. I think the biggest challenge with culture is that a lot of planning professionals don't think they need to think about that. And so they try to implement strategy without really thinking through all the cultural ramifications. And culture, change management, communications, about half of your job should be focusing on those elements, because the strategy poster is really only going to be meaningful for people if you help them along, if you have a disciplined process to thinking about how are we addressing the cultural challenges.
I
So
think that touched on the second question from Kyle. Where does change management assist with strategy and technology integration? I think you covered some of that just now.
That's right. That's right.
You
It's
want to
all
talk?
to me. To me, those are related questions. Change management to me is all about the discipline of thinking through, you're helping employees get from point A to point B. You're not managing them. That's I think one of the misconceptions over the years is that, if I pull these levers right, I'm going to get them to do the right thing. What you're trying to do is foster the right kind of culture so that they can appreciate why we're doing this. They understand why the change is needed, and they see what part they are expected to play within that new world. um and hopefully you can also, as a leader, appreciate that some of these threats are real, and you're somehow accommodating that. There are some things about some of these changes that are going to have negative consequences for folks. um and so, yeah, hopefully you're as careful about those kinds of changes as you can be, and as sensitive to those ramifications.
Yep, definitely have to be deliberate about those ones. Our last question is from Glenn. He said, thanks, David. But if a disruption drives something like a new theme, how much effort is expended to assets and or update the entire existing scorecard?
That's a great question. I think that 5 or 6 years ago, we used to go through a really slow process of, well, I say 5 or 6, quite a while back. There was a slow process of trying to update everything. You'd go back. It's like, let's go back from day one and completely overhaul our strategy, and then make all the changes. But now, what we try to think of it as, all of this is, we want to be more agile. That means that every quarter we're going to talk about our current strategy within the context of what things have changed, and it shouldn't be that hard to make a quick change. If you need to, you usually don't change your high level strategy that often. Um, if you do need to completely overhaul your themes, the way I showed a few slides ago, then that would be a big change. Now that I think about it, you would have to go back, and it would have broad impacts on your organization. That's pretty rare. What you do want to be able to do, though, is if you've got a customer experience strategy, and you're or an objective about improving the customer experience. If I'm changing from one tool to another tool, it shouldn't have that much of an impact on the planning elements.
All right, sounds good. So I think that's it for us and questions for today. Feel free to reach out to us. In my presentation, there'll be some contact details there, so you can send a personal or a message offline. Let me just quickly take us through briefly some tidbits about our upcoming summit. 1 second before everyone scoops off. All right, here we go. David, you'll just confirm for me if you can see the screen here.
Okay, it's loading.
All right.
There it is. We see it.
Okay, good. So our theme for this year, as I mentioned before, is on strategy execution. And while our summits are Caribbean-based, we invite everyone internationally. It's not relegated to the Caribbean region only. So we're looking forward to see you guys. It'll be at the Royalton. So feel free to come over, have an experience while you develop yourself technically in the area of strategy and strategy execution. I mean, why not? Yes, we'll be happy to have you guys on board. All details for bookings, for hotel and so forth, you'll find on the website, of course, our landing page, www.strategyplusconsulting.org. So we have 2 events lined up for this 2-day summit. Event 1 is our symposium, as I mentioned before. That's on June 27th. And then event 2, our strategy execution essentials course, is on the 28th. And so we encourage everyone to be there in person. However, we will take on a case-by-case basis online applications. Thank you again to our partners. Thank you to David for kicking off our first webinar of our webinar series. very informative. Yes, it's a bit technical, but I trust as we go through the process, David will continue to try to keep it as understandable as possible so that you're able to really take away some great tools and techniques. So we have the Strategy Management Group, under which the Balanced Scorecard Institute falls under. There's the Strategy Association, Strategy Plus, and of course our collaborator, HRWise, who's based in St. Lucia. I'm the host, as I mentioned earlier. I am the MD of Strategy Plus and your host for the CSS 2024. So Summit Day 1 at the Royalton, what's in store? So in terms of the lineup, there will be some BSI lecturers, at least 3. There's a keynote and then 2 others by our international BSI experts. And you also have, in between that, we usually have some panels and some panel discussions. We will have about 9 to 12 regional industry panelists, various industries, corporate and government. So far, we have from banking, we have in energy and petroleum, as well as I think electricity is there. We'll see when we scroll down. And we will also have some others from the region. We like to hear from the region and not only the experts at BSI, but we want to hear from the region as well. What's been happening? How have they been in their strategic planning and execution process? What have been their learnings, their challenges, and so forth? All right, so for feature lectures, these are the 3 that you can look forward to. Our keynote by David, Agile Execution, Adapting Strategies and Leadership in a Dynamic World. We have lecture 2, Unlocking Strategy Success, Proven Tools and Techniques by the founder of the Balanced Scorecard Institute, Howard Rom. And then you have lecture 3, Navigating the Strategy Maze from Blueprint to Reality by their new senior consultant, Adam Ash. Yeah. Panel topics, however, will be in and around governance. We'll continue the discussion on leadership and strategy execution, creating a performance culture, aligning and operationalizing strategy, and then some. So we look forward to those. In terms of the panelists that we've scouted thus far and have confirmed their participation, we have CIBC, we have a consultancy out in St. Lucia, which is our MD of the HRWise consultancy. We have GM Salt Petroleum, Digicel, who's a big telecoms provider here in the Caribbean region. We have from the BVI, the Airports Authority, and Lucy Leck, which is the electricity provider in St. Lucia. So that's what we have so far. As we confirm our other panelists, we will continue to update our website or landing page. Last year, these were the lineups we had from various countries, various industries, as you can see, and it was a mix of leaders and those who hold leadership roles, but also actual strategists and strategic planners. And so that's our aim year on year with the summit, as I said, to garner insights from persons at these levels, and so that you can really hone some valuable takeaways. Yeah, and both from government, as I said, and in the private sector. Okay, so Summit Day 2 will be taking us through our one-day course. That's the Balanced Scorecard Strategy Execution Essentials. Yeah, so if you want to get a little bit more, because we're just scooting through this very quickly, as I said, feel free to go up onto our landing page and browse, get a little bit more on what this will cover. But basically, the emphasis is on making sure there's an interactive experience, and we want to be able to help our participants to contribute to their strategic plans and be effective in executing their plans at the end of the day. Yeah. So learn how to make strategy happen, how to establish strategy implementation processes, and all of the basics of how existing strategy plans can be improved and implemented. So we want our participants to leave with that roadmap and those tools to be able to do that in their own organizations. Who should attend? So Again, strategy is usually relegated to the executives at the top or those at the helm, boards, and so forth. But we'd like to also see other junior managers or even senior professionals who get involved in execution. HR, we know, play a big part in managing what we just spoke about in terms of change management and managing the process as you execute your strategic plan. So all are invited. Strategy is not a functional discipline. It carries across all functional areas, whether it's marketing, finance, HR, procurement, any technical areas. As leaders, or even those who are aspiring to be leaders, it is a competence that is required at all functions and at any levels, as some of you would know who are on here with us. So register now. Make sure for our upcoming webinars, we have webinar 2 and webinar 3 still. May 29th, we have the strategy, execution, obstacles, and solutions. And then webinar 3, aligning and operationalizing strategy. So really, really good topics to cover, very salient information. And of course, you can use this as an opportunity to get more information about the summit, or even on the one-day course if you decide to just attend either or, you can get more info there and what else the Balanced Scorecard Institute has to offer. All right, so thank you so very much for attending today, and we look forward to see you on the next. Feel free to share with your colleagues and anyone else that you think will benefit from these webinars. They're free, so I mean, share around as much as you like. And we look forward to having you guys in June. Definitely, as I say, come experience the Caribbean, come experience St. Lucia if you're not a St. Lucian. Yeah, join David and myself and the rest of the BSI team.